I've heard it said in the business realm, and you've probably heard this too from many, I think. Tony Robbins has said it, who he got it from Jim Rohn, who knows, no doubt he got it from someone, but you are the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I've said that to my kids, and I know that that's true and believe that to be true. But if I've heard it and taken it one step further, and in that you are the 5 nervous systems you spend the most time with as well. And I say that because I think that's part of well-being. So I would add 2 pieces to this conversation, because what does that even mean? What does being well mean? And you touched on one, which is presence. Um, and actually, let me tie one thing and then go back to that. So I mentioned health, wealth, wisdom, happiness. It's a long time framework of mine. I touched on wealth. Um, Wisdom, I didn't touch on. And wisdom comes from experiences, having lots of experiences, being a learner, curious, a lifelong learner. And by the way, this is my framework. This isn't gospel. This is just the gospel of Scott. And then living in the present moment is, in my mind, the ultimate wisdom. So now we're touching into well-being, being able to be present. Like that's the bottom depth of the iceberg on the what's wisdom really is. I think it's being present, being in the now. And part of that is having a regulated system that you can be in the now and feel in it. And this is why I think this is important. And then I'll share maybe a little of my story of how I got to this stage and conclusion, which I'm not finished yet. That's why I'm still here, no doubt. But it's this. Um, you know, here we are in wrapping up 2025, and there's a couple things that have become pretty popular over the last decade or so, which I'm familiar with all of these, but meditation. So I've meditated since probably over 15 years, and recognizing that I needed to do something to slow my system down, hard charging, doing things, pushing. And it's like, how do I down regulate that? So I tapped into meditation. There's been this psychedelic renaissance that's bubbled up, where people are looking to find other ways for explorations and to heal and do these different things. And I think all these things are useful, well, potentially useful done properly, but they also can be a form of escape. And they also, so you can meditate to transcend, and you're actually leaving your system, right? Church, and there's nothing wrong with transcendence and seeing what's in some ways really going on. And some may disagree with this context, but okay, to each his own. But like, okay, is the end game really love and this beautiful next state that we all go to? Well, some believe that, and that I would align with that experience and belief. But then what are we doing here in this body? And so that's good to know. And I think great information, but we interact at this human level. And so you could use these things as actually bypassing, right? And I think that there's a danger. I heard it called maybe even a mindfulness bubble. I read a paper on where meditation's the new thing. Well, yes, but if we're again using it in a manner to escape, it's like if we can't work with mastering this human experience, why are we transcending? Once you master it, maybe that's a better time to transcend. All right. So all that to say, I think it's a yes and. What I'll add to this is just a little on my story is, and I think this is a pattern with entrepreneurs and business owners, which is part of my story. It's all I've ever done has been an entrepreneur and business owner. It's not who I am, but it's what I've done. Starting in middle school doing magic all the way to then entering wealth management at a very young age. And that's what I've done for the last 30 plus years. And so the point of that is, though, uh, at why did I do that? Well, coming from a very poor family, I wanted to figure out money, because I'm like, that kind of sucked. I think we could do this better, and there may be a better way than what my folks knew. And turns out there is a different way, and maybe a more successful financial way than what they knew. So I kind of figured that one out. But why? What was driving that? And what I tapped into was some dissociation, some impacts and things that happened to me at a young age that I didn't like. So I wanted to push down. And so when meditation comes in, that's great. It's a tool that can be good, but it can also be a tool that I'm still not looking at what's really there. And in looking at what's really there and allowing it, as Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it's going to show up in your life and you're going to call it fate. That's not the exact, but that's what he's saying. So you're going to enter into a relationship, you're going to have a business partner, and all of these interactions are going to be mirrors for you to heal, to become more whole, what you've been unable to face up to this point. So all that to say, Ben, to me, this is part of what is meant by well-being. A whole person, all parts of you, that has a regulated nervous system that can show up, or not perfect, but in a way that's more whole and complete, not needing anything and being able to be in relationships. So there would be a lot to unpack there, which I'm happy to do any of it, but I love this conversation on well-being.
Yeah, Scott, as I was listening to you, the imagery that kept coming to my head was this idea of like, I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like visualizing this version of like myself, not actually my physical form, but like this ethereal form. And I'm thinking about when we're trying to be present, which by the way, it seems so simple, right? Just be present, but that is like there's complexities in just that are like, I mean, too long for us to talk about today. But the thing I kept going in my head was that you kept neurological system or nervous systems, which are basically energy systems, right? I mean, that's what a nervous system is. And it made me think about, is being present, and actually further context, you talk about meditation. It's like you leave. And that's how I visualize as an entrepreneur, like we're so visionary, right? Like we're not here, we're already to that thing. We can already just be and see and sense and taste and feel like what that next whatever iteration is. Is being present the balance between past nervous system storage, future nervous system excitement, and the current nervous system reactions. And when those things are balanced, and how you've either processed and excavated the past, catalyze what is potentially coming, and being able to like be aware of what's happening now and be able to process all these systems all at once. That is in essence where you're actually finding that presence. I don't know. That's a vision that just came to me, and as I was listening to you, like,
I don't know. The only challenge I would have with that is I hear that, Ben, and I'm taking it in, is see how this fits on, right? And where this fits in. I think part of the challenge with that is if we show up, which most of us do, me included. So one of the things for me, I don't know how many years, but I can look at things from a perspective going, of course they're doing what they're doing, versus how could they do that? Actually, if you look at this person's birth and everything that's happened throughout their life, of course they're doing what they're doing. And if you live that exact same life, it's extremely likely you would be doing the same thing. Right? So from that perspective, I'm like, letting that go, to me, and letting go of future is how to be more in the presence. And this is what I mean. If this moment, what did it take for this moment right here to actually happen? Well, first of all, a lot. Second of all, if one thing had not been lined up of these billion different interactions that have us here talking today, it wouldn't have happened. So my point in saying that, and we could really unpack that, but I have very little to do, almost nothing, to being here today. It's just a series of events that's happened, and part of it was my parents and their parents and great grandparents and all these different things, and here we are. So, in recognizing that, then it allows me to just be in the moment more of experience. What's going to happen today? Where's this conversation going to go? So it's changed my perspective even on my planning. So I still am a business owner and have things that I'm involved in. And I used to be, and I'm still very good at visioning and putting together a plan. I'm just less apt to do it now. And this isn't a good or bad, just it's just my experience because all the things that brought me to this place of where I'm at in life. And it's because I'm wanting it to be more organic and more like nature. I think nature has so much to teach us if we would listen. Um, and I think I believe we come from nature, and this is back to that regulated nervous system. And I know I'm beating this drum a little bit, but it's up for me because it even ties to this. Without a regulated system, I'm going to be having this conversation and I'm going to be putting together strategic plans from here with the system that I'm not scared of. Because a lot of times we're not listening because it's some scary shit in there and we don't want to feel it. So we stay up here because it's not comfortable down here. But getting comfortable, we have that same instinct as nature does. And those answers are going to organically come up. What we should do today, what we should build that the world actually needs right now, organically as instinct in our system. You still use this for critical thinking, but it's coming from a more organic instinct than it is the mind. So that's the importance to me of the system, this body that we carry, and the intelligence that it can bring to living a great life, doing amazing things through business and relationship, etc.
Yeah, one of my I'm gonna call him my soul spiritual coaches, Daniel White. He made this comment. He goes, "What happens if we came into the world and we just moved about the world without agenda?" He's like, "Ben, can you imagine just hopping on stage and just not having an agenda?" But what you're saying to me is really sort of like when you're here. And by the way, if you're just listening to this, I'm pointing at my head. You know, it's like this is logical, this is linear. Hey, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4. Versus what Scott, what I was hearing you say was like, hey, but when you're down here and you're just listening rather than trying to demand, is that things can just happen.
I love that, and I love what you said that Daniel said. I've had this mantra. All the team members would share. Erica would tell you this. Um, how do we show up without an agenda? So, in our world of what we do, so wealth management, literally each wealth advisor, I'm like, every meeting, I don't care if a client's been there for 15 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter. How do you show up in that meeting without an agenda? Because what happens is if we show up as wealth managers, then that's exactly what we hear in the conversation. And what if a potential client, how beautiful could this be? Potential client comes in. They have a health concern, like they just found out something health-wise, and they're coming in. I'll give you a real example without using names. I mentioned this earlier. I have examples from doing this 30 some years. Okay, so I meet with this potential client. This person's got $5 million of income coming in passively. They net worth, I don't remember, 50 to 100 million. It was quite high. And we were going through this way to well process, which is our process as far as a team presenting. And I'm asking really just open-ended questions to learn who this person is as a human being, because as some tax things were discussed early on and the different things that we potentially can do early on, which are massive, he doesn't care. Why? Because he's got like 5 million of passive income. He's got more assets than he's going to spend. What came in open-ended conversations without any freaking agenda was, I heard something about his son, and I could tell I'm watching him, so I can see his system react, and I'm like, "Oh, there's something there." So I dig. Well, his current wife was not the wife of the son, and the son was involved in the business. If something happened to him, what was gonna happen to the business, the assets, the other kids, but specifically his current wife and son. His son couldn't come to the house without knocking and making sure it was okay to come in with his current wife. And you could see this guy, so I dug into that. What Tell me more about that. I could see him, his eyes got wet. It was emotionally a real pain point. Well, you know what he needed? Well, I my assumption of what he needed without saying I know what he needed, that's what the thing was, right? I who gives a shit about the tax savings or that we're gonna get this kind of rate of return or this kind of trust? No. What if we had contacts that we could introduce him to, which I suggested? Um, Actually, this is a mutual friend of Garrett's. That she's a business partner at this point, and one of my dearest friends, Rich, who's amazing at creating what we could call family constitutions. But that's not the amazing part. It's the ability to have 2 days in conversations with family members to get to the real elephant in the room and the real painful things going on in most people's lives and bring some harmony and some peace. Well, the only way we were able to even come close to getting there was to show up without an agenda. Like, what if that's really our job, is to just be, in our world, problem solvers, not assets under management, not the annual fee. Yes, we need to make money and have profit to make the whole thing go. But if we can do that as showing up with no agenda as problem solvers, I just think it's a better way to get there and serve people in the present moment without having an agenda.
It seems like that there's two parallel paths that are happening here. There's an internal path, which is we're talking about nervous systems. In my brain, I'm thinking audits, regulating, and empowering. Like those are kind of the constructs. And then there's this external one where we have all these different identities. And rather than showing up, hey, here's the identity I am, like, hey, you cued this in me and be like, sure, I could show up as a wealth manager. But when you actually show up externally for others without an agenda, it almost makes me think that is actually being present for them. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of how I'm seeing this, is there's an internal presence, external presence, and through that construct. So you've obviously sat through and with tens of thousands of meetings with people talking about everything from taxes and all these other different things, which are basically the I call them the surface level of the tactical. But if you understand, well, why are you wanting these things? Like, what are you doing with that? If you follow through, here's a tax savings. Well, what are you going to do with that money? Well, why are you doing that with that money? Well, why are you actually choosing that? Right? You keep going down. You get down into the transformational level. If you were talking to our audience, how would they actually do an audit and then regulate that nervous system and then empower the things that are going to make them more being well or in their well-being? And let's start there. And then let's just start there.
Well, you mentioned something earlier, and this is something, there's a lot of, I think, synergies and overlap and similarities with what we do, which is probably why, one reason maybe we're talking, which I do find interesting because it doesn't happen that often to this level. But you mentioned iceberg, and I've used that analogy because this is the idea of showing up with no place to be and not having an agenda, because we want to get to the bottom of the iceberg. What's really going on in this person's life as a problem solver? And to get there, yeah, you got to have you got to create space, because sometimes they don't even know. So asking the right questions to get there. Um, but your question is, hmm, how to get to the bottom of the iceberg and then how to regulate the nervous system to get there. I want to make sure I'm capturing your question right.
Yeah, I think how do they actually go through what you were talking before? If this is like a nervous system game, like how do they do the audit of like the hard things, going from the head down into the the real hard things, so that they can then regulate the automaticity, subconscious sort of maybe because I mean I thought it was really interesting. You said, "Hey, of course they do these things." And I like how you just said, because if you can actually put what you're talking about as empathy, right? Is like if I can imagine their birth till now, instead of them doing this and they're purposely doing this. And by the way, these things will help with marriages, friendships, business relationships. That it just sort of like, okay, well, then if we're going back that far, then we have to obviously audit. And I don't think I've heard anyone talk about auditing a nervous system.
Yeah. There's a lot here to potentially unpack. But I like it. And here's what I'll say is this. I think the question becomes getting to the bottom of the iceberg and auditing the nervous system. I think the question becomes why. But before we can say why, you have to recognize what most would call being triggered, which is not accurate, but everyone knows what I'm saying when I say that. You know when your heartbeat has just picked up and you're feeling a little uncomfortable. And so you either want to interject something in the conversation or you pull back because you don't want to go there. There's a trigger, but it's not a trigger. It's actually an activation, again, Scott Ford's belief, meaning this is happening inside you. It actually has nothing to do with what's happening on the outside. We think it has something to do. They said this. Yeah. That has if we think back to everything that had to take place to get here, again, this would take for a long time to unpack, but it truly has nothing to do with you. What's happening is it's activating something inside of you. Now, this activation could have happened at 2, at 17, at 25, at whatever, like something happened, and what's being said is activating. Why I like that word is because triggering's out there. They triggered something. No, they activated something. So I just want to set that context because it's happening in you, right? So the first is just noticing it. Oof, like okay, so then I would go, well, what is that? Like, what is the feeling? Is it heat in my body? Is it a sensation? Am I feeling anger? Right? Am I feeling sadness? Am I feeling whatever? But a- and then we can get to the why. Why is that bothering me? These are all pieces because I think everyday interactions, I don't think we need gurus per se, or we don't need, some of these teachings are great. But the point is, I think we have the wisdom in us if we just listen, because life is our everyday guru and teacher. It's just going to point things out to us that are going to be activating, and then asking what is the activation, and then why is that active? Why does that even why is this bothering me? That's the work. It's not fixing the other person. So to me, that's the beginning stages of getting um a more regulated system. Let me paint this picture too, if I can, Ben, because I hopefully this will give a frame and context that we can hang these things off of so listeners have that. So to me, I mentioned health, wealth, wisdom, and happiness. So I have this thing that I'm up to now. I'm calling Infinite Entrepreneur, but this is the framework. It's 4 things, and the idea is to be able to live in a flow state, not a force state. All right, so it's an infinity symbol. A whole story behind that too, but it's 4 things. The starting, which by the way, I'm now doing, but I didn't start here. But the starting point is healing at the individual level. All right. And by the way, this is indigenous wisdom. This comes from indigenous teachings a long, long time ago that I think we forgot. And I could share where I think that happened and came from as well. So here's the frame. Healing at the individual level is exactly what we're talking about. healing at the physical, mental, spiritual level, which does create a more regulated system, right? Because it's the physical, mental, spiritual level of how we show up. And there's a lot to unpack. And some of that is recognizing where we're activated. There's a ton to unpack there. But if we can know that that's our work here to do, then from there, we can go to the second part of the infinity symbol, which is healing at the family level. So we could create a family constitution, but ultimately what we're looking to do is to create harmony in the familiar family. Let's break the chains that were passed down from our parents, grandparents, and some of the crap we don't want. Let's add in what we really do of how we want to live and share that with next generations if they choose to participate. But harmony, right? And who are we and what do we value? Then we can go to the business and tie it to philanthropy and create what I call the 4 Ps of a sustainable business or sustainable philanthropy, which is purpose, people, process, and profits. Then we can do the final piece, which is what you and I both do of how do we make the money clean? So we have a family office and manage all this financial assets, but we're making it clean by 2 ways. One, now we're clear to align the money with our individual values, our family values, and our business and philanthropy values that are all aligned, right? And so it's supporting these things. And we vote with our dollars, right? So what most people, if they knew what they really own versus what they value, they would fall out of their chair. So that's the frame of how this conversation, because there's been things that are hanging off, but I wanted to just kind of frame how my mind works. It's basically hanging off of that infinity symbol, off those 4 pieces. And the indigenous wisdom there's a lot, but one of them is I, we, all. They taught specifically Native American cultures that we heal individually at the I level. Then we heal at the we level, which is familiar family and relationships. Then we heal at the all level. So I, we, all. And that's what I just outlined: individual, family, then business, philanthropy, going to the world. And again, there's a lot I could share there of where our Constitution came from and things that were left out, but I'll just for now say they had a lot of wisdom that I think we haven't brought with us. And I think it's time to do that. And that's one of them, is healing at the individual, family, and business, philanthropic, I, we, all level.
So, but I want to pull on that thread, Scott. Why did that get left behind? I mean, that seems so simple yet profound in the wisdom. I, we, all. Like, where did all of that? And I also find interesting a lot of this comes from healing, and healing I feel like is again another like offshoot of love, right? The desire to heal. But where do we go off road on this?
Oof, this one is a lot to unpack too, but here's what I'll say. Yeah. So you're asking me, so I'm going to give you what I think. Okay. I think this is my frame. And I'll give context here too, because I was actually born in a Baptist minister's home. You probably don't know that, but just for context. So for what I'm about to say, lots I could share there, but that gives you a context of the frame of my upbringing, right? And what that was framed on as far as structure. But it created a lot of questions for me, like, well, why do we believe this? Or why do you believe that? And why does the Bible say this? And why does it say that? And well, this piece actually doesn't make sense to me. Why? This has been the pattern for me. Like, this isn't making sense. And so I try to put this together of what actually does make sense to me. So your question of, well, why did we leave that indigenous, some of those things out? Because it seems simple, and I agree. And I'll say 2 things to that. I mean, this is part of what happened in India, and certainly what happens to First Peoples and Native American peoples of this country. People coming in with a belief system, construct, and structure, which was religious in this case, but it could even be argued the English language as a whole was used to weaponize, because it's a sloppy language. So there's a hole we could go down. But right, because what does God mean, and what does sin mean, and what does this mean and that mean, and there's just fluctuations in that, and then that can be used to be weaponized, and I think it was. So my answer would be religion and language was used to weaponize and take control. Um, why? That's bigger than my pay grade, but I think that's what happened. And then so these a lot of things were left behind. So let me do an add-on boat onto this piece, and that is one of the companies that I'm still involved with, Legato Family, creates these family constitutions. So it's that second piece of harmony for families. And in doing that, it created me to do a lot of due diligence on where did the Constitution come from? Who did it? I knew a lot of this, but like, what's it really saying? And I learned that it actually came from the Iroquois Confederacy, which is Native American peoples. They mirrored the Constitution off of the Great Law of Peace, which was around for centuries, over 200 years. And so the founding fathers here were like, this is like the longest standing document. Why don't we model that? Well, they did, but they tweaked it. And some of the tweaks that they took out, one, well, there's a lot, but two that come to mind for me. One is seventh generation thinking. How's the decision we're about to make going to affect the generation, seven generations from now? And they included all living things, not just humans. So how's it going to affect the water, the plant life, the wildlife, all these things 7 generations from now? I think I think that's very important, and I think it's part of some things we may be challenged with now because they were left out. Another was the role of women in leadership and government. So they had a critical role, and one is an example would be for war. The young men were whooping and ready to go, and let's go to battle, and we're going to take and do X, Y, Z. And the women are like, no, 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 no. So the women actually decided whether they went or not. And these are things. It's not experience, just things I read. Well, these are very important things to potentially leave out, right? And so, that's my attempted answer to you saying why are why don't they seem simple and straightforward enough? So that's my take on why they may have been left out.
Well, I find that fascinating. Number one, didn't know that. And what's crazy is that I think that when we think back in those days, they're like, they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have electricity. I mean, we are so much more advanced than they were. But when you look at that construct, I mean, isn't that just a constitution of well-being? I mean, this is.
Yeah. And how I think were able to do that? It wasn't here. It was instinct. It was in them. And they were quiet enough and regulated enough to listen.
So it seems a lot of what you are building is in essence bringing seventh generation thinking, like bringing presence, peace, awareness, love, acceptance. Probably, I think acceptance is probably an underrated skill, but acceptance of this is who I have been. This doesn't mean the acceptance of who I have to continue to be and become. But that's sort of just mind-boggling. I mean, I think so often people think the Constitution, like, it's such a great document, and it is such a great document. It's one of the great documents of like modern time, plus minus, like, and yet it came from. I think if you were to ask them at the time, our forefathers, they would have said that maybe the indigenous people they were antiquated in technologies, antiquated in fashion, antiquated in all these other different things. And the reality is just that they just came from a different space. And what success? I mean, that's the difference, right? The definition. How did they define success back then?
Yes. Yes. And why it's important today to me, why this is up for me, well, because of the life I've lived, right? All the impacts and things that have happened that led me to where I am today. And I use this as an example, which by the way, this is a new one. The other one didn't work out so well for me. But we all have this thing, right? And we're talking from one. And so I have a lot of, in this case, Apple products. They're great. And this technology is amazing. And I didn't know Steve Jobs personally, so I don't know this. I know he was a big meditator and had his experience, I think, with plant medicine, psychedelics. And so I think for sure he was a great, certainly visionary. And well, let me ask you, do you think there's a dark side to this technology?
100%. I think 100%. I think that the faster speed that we have access does not mean a deeper connection. In fact, I would actually say the faster the speed, the less connection is required. Because connection requires presence.
Yes. Yes. This is exactly um why I'm called to this. And I'm not called to because if it pivots tomorrow, okay, fine. But this idea of infinite entrepreneur to me is one, it's my own journey and it came to this. And I think it's wanting to be birthed. I think nature and whatever the belief system, God, source, whatever people believe, but some intelligence is like bringing this up for me. And I think that is some innate wisdom. And I've had these experiences and now it's like, the moment in front of me, can I lift it? Can I make it better? And my answer with is yes. And it's wanting to be created. And here's one of the reasons why there is a dark side to this. There is many benefits. It's why I have it and utilize it. But I think part of the dark side that is in this is because if we don't do our work, then it's going to get projected. And it's not only projected on people, it's projected in our creations. So if we do it and we can integrate that darkness in us and not push it away, shame it, act like it's not there, or blow it out on someone, then it doesn't have to be, squirted out on people or on our creations. And that's the bigger thing for me. Like it's not just that, but then we get to actually live a deeper, more rich life because we can be in more relationships, more connected, more intimacy, more compassion, all these things. Um, and we ultimately do make things a little better for those behind us and still living because our creations as entrepreneurs won't have as much darkness projected on them.
I think the thing, Scott, that I love about with what you're doing and what you're talking about is that I think one of the greatest disservices that I think that, especially for us in America, we have the Industrial Revolution still style education system, which is very much emphasizes in the doing and the scoreboarding back for that. You're good or bad. You get an A. Or in my case, my solid 2.9 GPA coming out of high school.
That might be me, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. But the thing that's become more and more clear is that there is this, I think, culture of the more you're doing, the more hours you're working, the more there's this badge of honor. When the reality of it is, people who are, I think, having great amounts of well-being, great amounts of success, and however you want to denote that, on the external, the ones who I think have the most, both internal and external, are the ones who are spending the time thinking. I think the adage should be, you get paid to think, not to do. And that's what's fascinating about what you're doing with this infinite entrepreneur, is that you're causing them to actually think. I mean, just when I was just listening to your structure, right? Healing of the individual level, at the family level, the business philanthropic level, and then really thinking about your money, not just going, well, I have it, so therefore I can. It's like, well, do you want to? Do you feel called to? and does it actually measure back to your voting? But these were all thinking mechanisms, and healing is a byproduct of thinking.
I would add to that then, and being. And what I mean by that is um creating enough space and margin, which is I think part of what you're meaning by thinking, right? You're just not doing grinding, but you're creating space and margin. I'm just adding to it and getting out of here and into here. It's both, right? Needing both, because then you can tap into instinct and you're getting things that the mind cannot, and then you're using critical thinking to do something with that. Yes. Um, yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting. I was talking to a guy I work with on a health front. You will work with multiple, docs and people on my health to be proactive. And I was talking to a guy right before our call. And one of the workouts that I do is it's a Mike Metzger. That if you're familiar with him, he was a bodybuilder back in the day, right? And he was natural, and he had the hit that he made really well known, HIT, so the high intensity training to failure, which by the way, I've done these for years. They suck. They're so hard, but they're only 20 minutes and you only do them 2 to 3 times a week. So I love that. But where I'm headed was this guy knows it. So we're talking about Mike and his workouts. And he's like, well, you got to remember, Scott, Mike's premise. He's like, but it applies to all of life. I'm like, all right, tell me more. He's what could think about it. You're going in, and this premise is you are working a body part muscle. Okay, so let's call it biceps or quads or traps, but you're a specific muscle group that's narrow, and you're taking it to failure, and you are focusing on that only muscle. You're not focused on anything else. All energy, effort, and everything is going down to the fiber of it's that intense and it's that focused, but that's where you're going to get the uh, growth and benefits from doing it. That's what Mike made famous. He said, and then you're done. You don't think about that bicep until next week for 20 minutes. Don't you rest it. That's how this program works. Well, that's life. You focus in on your doing and you're like, oh, like do it. But then let nature take over and do what she does and like go do something else. And I just am like, yeah, I know that that's the space and margin, but I never thought about it from the actual Mike Metzger workout theory of hit. But I'm like, that's so true. Like when you're doing the thing, do the thing in very focused, but then like give it space and time and margin to do what it knows how to do. Right. So I just, found it interesting you brought that up of, um, yeah, you called it time to think, right? And pull away from the doing and the grind. And I'm like, yeah, that's where the magic happens. And actually, the infinite entrepreneur symbol, I have said from day one, the magic of that is the center point. Yes, it's the four things that need implemented and worked on and such, which will happen, but the answers and the magic comes from the center point. The center point is that instinct of knowing that I was talking about. Like I call it, there's things I'll just know, and my explanation is I know it in my knower. What is that? I don't know. Just know it. And it's in that still point of creating enough space and margin in my life to listen to hear that.
I mean, but you're hitting on something there. I think that's really critical. Listening. I'm curious from your perspective, as you worked with entrepreneurs and worked with these wealthy individuals who maybe have been wealthy on their balance sheet, but when you look at their network or their net worth of their nervous system may not have been. What have you found to be the difference between listening and hearing?
I think as humans, we suck at that.
Which one? Both or all the above?
Yeah, actually both. And it comes back to that having an agenda. Even if it's not business, but you're on to something else. You're not like really listening. So my experience, and we would do this in trainings with the advisors at the firm, we actually had training on listening. We had training on how to show up without an agenda. I've been recorded how much I talk versus how much I'm listening. And I think I'm in a podcast, so I'm sharing more than I would normally. However, I thought I was pretty good at it. And I was, and I still talk 60% of the time. And I was being recorded and knew it. So we're not as good as we think. So we did training on it. And the idea here is, again, we're wanting to get to the bottom of the iceberg and creating enough space and margin to allow to do that. So I've often said in our field of wealth management, but pick any field, but we'll use wealth management because we're in it. If a client's lucky, the professional will hear about 20 to 25% of the conversation, and they're going to launch the solution. If they're lucky, most will hear about 10%. And what's sad about that is all of the answers lie past 95% of the conversation, and they're easy. You just got to create enough space to get to that last 5%. And then all of a sudden, both you and that client are going, oh, this is what's really going on. Solutions are everywhere. Like we don't need another solution. They take care of themselves, but few can actually let it get to that point without jumping in with, here's what I can do to solve your problem when we haven't even got to the actual problem.
I feel like marriages could benefit from this training.
Yeah. I'm not probably the one to be giving this advice for that, but I do think that's true.
You know, well, I think that's that, and I think you're right. By the way, I think that if they're lucky, 20%, but it's probably more like 10%. And I have found that when you listen that often and you give the space for people to talk, is that often they already know the answer. It just no one has ever allowed the well to pour over. I mean, I mean, you strike me as a person that of similar sort of ilk of that. If it's the power is not in the in the advice, the power is in the question.
They do. My belief is know the answer, and that's where the answer ideally comes from, right? And that's listening to just create the space to give them to be able to get to what's really going on. And then the answer takes care of itself. And yeah, should come from them.
So Scott, what if someone's listening to this going, okay, maybe this resonates with them. Maybe it doesn't resonate with them because they're maybe in denial or because they haven't had them recorded.
Or they think I'm full of shit, which is cool too.
Yeah, I mean, you are from West Virginia, so who knows?
I mean, this isn't that hard to figure out. Yeah, fair enough.
But what are three things that you could go would infinitely increase their listening skills? I know it's if you're listening to this audience, you're like, he's asking for something like we've known since like birth. But I think that's the point, though, is because we've had it since birth. We probably neglect it the most. So what would you say, Scott?
All right. Well, here the first thing that comes to mind is this question. Either asking them or saying it to yourself. And that is, there must be a good reason you feel this way. And meaning it, because there is a good reason, right? That's back to all the impacts they have that you have no idea the life they've lived, right? Even if you're married to them, you don't know all the things. It's impossible. So what's coming out now? There's a good reason it's coming out. So if you can either recognize that by saying there must be a good reason, even if you feel like attacked, there must be a good reason that you're feeling this way. Because there is. And if you just tell yourself that, it dampens the judgment and lets your impacts go silent to create some space to actually be curious. And that would be the second piece. And then from that space, be curious. There must be a good reason that you feel this way. And you're saying what you're saying. I'm curious, right? I don't know my third per se, Ben, but I think those two, um, that question and then open and then truly being curious. Hmm. Maybe fascination in some ways. Because we're all what's the right word? We're unique, we're weird, we're all of it. Okay, embracing that, and it's like curiosity and fascination. Wow, complex humans we are.
Yeah, we're complex, but we're also really simple. I mean, we are just we are basically walking collections of tapestry and tapestry that we don't even know. I mean, there are some that believe that in terms of like we are just continue on the stories of like our forebears, right? That we just continue those on. Um, Scott, you've talked a couple times about like a little bit of your upbringing and kind of hinted at the fact is like, hey, you grew up poor, right? I think most people who saw you today, I'm guessing in terms of your life and the monetary wealth you've been able to build. I mean, you've been around monetary wealth, and then you've actually transformed that into actually the true wealth, like that well-being, that incredible condition of well-being. Can you give a little bit of more background about your journey through this and where you were like, hey, I was like, when you say you're poor, like break that down. Like, what do you mean, like when you say poor?
Yeah, I can break it down for sure. So this goes the whole way back. So I was born in a Baptist preacher's home. We were in Tennessee. Dad was in seminary to become a preacher in Tennessee Temple. So I can remember as a kid, I still remember this, and there's pictures to remind me, but uh, those little Vienna sausages, that they were our meals. Like, I don't remember. I was a kid. How many days? But I can vividly remember mom not eating because she wasn't hungry. I'm not hungry. I'm an adult now. I'm a kid then, so I'm going to eat more of the sausages. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, she wasn't not hungry. She was making sure we had enough to eat. That was how poor we were back then. And then I would call us more, I don't know the word, lower middle class. I mean, mom and dad didn't have any money, but we always had a place we rented. And then they eventually, I think mom inherited some money from her folks. And so they bought a house in Maryland. Um, so that was an extreme. But then, I got pictures of me of kids in these freaking huge bell bottoms and clothes that didn't fit. I looked homeless and I'm like, mom, she's like, well, they were your brother Brad's. And so that's my oldest brother who's 15 years older than me. So probably wasn't the coolest kid with those clothes, but I was clothed. So we were really poor. And then, like I said, as time went on, as I became in high school and such, they bought a house and, you know, eh, dad was a preacher and he didn't take a salary. So he would, try to work. But, yeah, it was a poor household to start for sure, lower middle class, and I recognized how that affected because I they would make promises, we're gonna get a pool at this new place if we move here, and we're gonna do this for Christmas, and then you're gonna get this, and none of that ever happened. Didn't happen because they didn't have any money to do it. So I saw how that complicated their life, and I'm like, it this can't be that complicated. So that's part of what gave me, the drive. And look, the other thing is, and I'm very comfortable talking about I'm very open talking about this now, and before I wouldn't have been, but now I think how you break chains and make them better is, it's said that truth is where it's at, right? And it's said different than that, but the point is like, period, straight up truth. So there was plenty of things not awesome in the household. There was some abuse and traumas and impacts, and all that was confusing in my house because, he was a preacher. And I'm like, what is this? That I couldn't understand and reconcile. So I since have went back as I went on my own individual healing journey. I'm like, well, let's unpack this and not, but I was pushing it back. Like, no, this is normal, and if I told you some of these stories, you would be like, what are you talking about? Um, they were pretty intense, from physical, emotional abuse type things. And uh, that's partly, I think, what then led to me. You have that as on one end, and then you have a bystander on the other, not doing anything about it. And that's your mom, dad perspective. That can create someone who's going to have some control focus of controlling their world and creating companies and creating wealth or safety and creating these things. So that's the underlying driver. Let me also add the counterbalance is they stayed together. They did the best they could with the consciousness they had. Dad meant what he did when he was preaching. He believed all those things. Kudos and thank you. And I love them both. They're both deceased and on the other side. So it's both, right? I don't want to paint a picture of horror, but I ignored all that most of my life. And now I'm like, no, actually, that's not true. The truth is, it was what I just said. And there was good, right? I wouldn't be who I am today. They gave me, great things as far as drive and understanding and doing things to make me the other parts of who I am today too that I am happy about. But that's some context to what created this entrepreneurial spirit. And yeah, I mentioned doing magic in middle school. And then I was supposed to go to Liberty with a very small scholarship on football. I wasn't really big enough to be playing at that level, but I loved the game. It was a Christian school. Again, coming from this Baptist preacher's home, I wasn't ready for a Christian school at this age either. So I'm like, I'm not going to go. And I didn't. And I went right into this field. I started in insurance at 19 years old. And for whatever reason, I've been pretty good at it this whole time. It came naturally, just creating things and having this, again, maybe from maybe not all healthy things, but an insatiable appetite to learn and to grow and make things happen and work. Um, then led me to creating a family office because I was working with these entrepreneurs on their insurance and business owners and recognizing they don't understand taxes, investments, insurance, cash flow, really any of it. They're just good at what they do, and they need a place to go. And they don't have $1 billion to be able to have their own family office. So I'm like, saw this in '96 actually, and started my company Cornerstone to be that niche type of virtual, family office to help these business owners and entrepreneurs. And I've been doing it ever since, man. And so in some ways, scratching at this point my own itch, like this is what I need. Um, and yeah, so that's the story behind why I've done what I've done. A little bit about the journey. 'Cause clearly, there's a lot more there I could unpack, Ben, but that's the gist of it. And I'm still curious about that. Like, how do you make this experience better? My niche is business owners and entrepreneurs, hence the infinite entrepreneur. So that, as I said, that's the easy box, taking care of that finance piece at the beginning of our chat. In some ways, the more deep and challenging things for them to navigate that individual and family healing piece. But that's been my journey.
Well, thank you for sharing. And what I find fascinating about it is that I was just on yesterday recording a podcast, and it constantly comes up to me that decisions. One of my favorite quotes is by this Australian philosopher, F.W. Boreham. And he goes, we make our decisions, then our decisions turn around and make us. And I just find that just so incredible. But there's like this idea, this Robert Frost, is two roads divergent wood. And I'm curious from, I think, two sides of this. Are you the person you are if you hadn't witnessed and experienced that either physical, emotional, verbal abuse? So that's one question. And then second is, why is it that you saw that and witnessed that and you took a road to where here you are today? Like it, in all intents and purposes, like provided incredible foundation. And so why do you feel like either people take the road that you took, which I think is less often, and the other road, which is they continue on that chain? So I don't know where you want to start with either of those two questions.
Yeah, man, I'll share something else here too. So yeah, I would say to you, Ben, that uh the piece of am I who I am because of this? Absolutely yes. Now, if I take that deeper of who I really am, which is not what you're seeing and hearing, right? But the essence of me, well, that'll never change. So that that the experiences didn't affect that. But Scott Ford here talking to you with my essence and soul, um, is definitely these experiences have made me, right? It's how I can look back and see the challenging parts that were hard, hurtful, etc., and embrace them because part of that's what's made who I am today, right? Without it, so I can look back. But there's the thing in the past, I think I would bypass it because it's like, oh yeah, yeah, but now I'm good. Like it's who made me. But I think you can bypass it if I'm making sense versus really looking and go, actually, no, that's not cool. That's actually not ideal. That's actually not acceptable. And integrating that and being with it, then I can accept it and go, and it's made me who I am. But if I just jump to that without really being in it and feeling whatever emotion that I was feeling at the time, I think that's still in your system and you bypassed it.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the second question here. Why is it that you didn't continue the chain versus, uh, like, I feel like a lot of other people could have used that as fuel for their, well, this is why I made this choice. This is why, like, I did drugs. This is now why I'm drinking. This is why, like, I can't hold down a job. This is why, I'm on my fourth or fifth marriage. Um, why do you think people, like, what's the difference between in terms of the road you chose and people, because you're not the first and won't be the last who's like had a story like that, but yet here you are. I mean, we started this whole conversation off talking about love. I mean, so just give context here as we bring this all full circle. I mean, we're talking about people who loved each other enough to bring you guys into this world, yet maybe didn't love themselves enough, right? And they did the best that they could, yet, but here you are now talking about infinite entrepreneur, creating like this healing, right? Talking about love. What is it that causes a person to go down the right lane versus the left lane?
I wish I knew the exact answer to that, Ben, because I've given it a lot of thought. I'll even give context of, I'm the youngest of five, and um, my brother died in 2020. So there's five. My oldest, 15 years older than me, and then the one closest to me, four of five, me being the youngest, was my brother Eric, who was my best friend because we were 4 years apart in age and, grew up together. And he went down a different path. And, that was how he died in 2020. And I speak about this because I feel like it can help others. And I feel like he actually talks to me, and I know he does, in fact, meaning we have our own form of communication that I feel his presence around, and he's comfortable with me sharing. So why does that kind of thing happen? Like, because it's never why the drug, it's why the pain. What's the pain that's causing that numbing, right? And then it can go this far as it happened with him, where you transition and you're no longer with us. Why, man? I wish I knew. I mean, grace is the only thing I can think that comes up because I can't think of anything in me. I could say I did this and that, and there's truth to that, but why did I do this and that? And some others don't, and they numb it, escape from it, so whatever. And I'm wanting at this stage to actually go into it, like not be scared of it. Straight, what is this? I'm curious. What made me curious, our very first thing started about that. I can think as a kid, I was a pain in the ass because I always asked why. It doesn't make sense to me. You got to do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't make sense to me. So I would be a pain in the ass to raise. So God bless my parents for that. But where others weren't and took a different path, what causes that, man? The only answer I could think of is the I'm not sure how helpful, but grace is the only thing I could tell you. Like what causes.
When I think about your story, I think it's I'm sure these aren't the only things you're going back and unpacking, but it's really clear that these were like when you see or experience or like have something like that happen to you in your formative years, like it's my guess is it's vivid. My guess is when you go back and unpack it, like some of these moments are like they just happened. But I think there's a lot of us who have maybe if you want to call them micro traumas and and I use those like loosely, right? In terms of the word trauma, because like people have trauma that's like it's like you go, okay, if I was to define it like that, but we all have them. And I think that's also one of the conditions as humans is we're like, well, it wasn't that much of a trauma. But I think if it leaves like a little paper cut, I think we can call that what it is. It's your own version. It's like success, right? It's the how you define it. How do people go back, right? Because you talked earlier about triggers, like you know, and my guess is triggers happen more in environments where you feel the most comfortable. So business partners, marriages, siblings, where you have like triggers that like you know that really that come to light. How do you go back and audit these traumas that, quite frankly, if they're not like like there's some shit you saw that you there's no way you could like bury down. Like just it just you saw it, it happened, and now it's like here. But how do people audit? I mean, you're going back in like individuals, families, businesses in the business of healing, right? And unpacking. So how do people, if they're listening to this, to go, if this happens, this might actually be something you want to unpack.
Hmm. I'll take it at our level, at like our what we do with wealth management, because I think it ties in as important, and then I'll take it deeper. So at our level in wealth management, I think this kind of conversation actually been it comes to no surprise based on our conversation up to this point. But like this is the juice, man. What I mean is, what do we do? Well, estate planning, tax planning, and cash flow, and all the things in wealth management. But just pause on estate planning for a second. What typically happens? Okay, you need one. You need a will, you need a trust, you need a domestic asset protect, whatever it is. You're going to see a good attorney who's going to draft the document, and they're going to get the document. That's worthless. Like what really needs to happen is what's really going on. Who are the players on the field? And what are these relationships like? And who's who? And where's the dysfunction? And who? There are these are the things to unpack to then be able to take to the attorney so then that they have clarity on what to draft. So it's almost like um it's like therapy work. How does he say it? Like having someone who can like dig in and have these unspoken, potentially uncomfortable conversations, but do it in a way that's comfortable enough to have them versus just punching a document out and checking a box and saying, yeah, we did estate planning. Right. So I think it ties to what we do. I think it's critically important. I think there should be more training in it. And then what I would say is, how does someone tap into this? And I think how we got here, by the way, is how are you going to have well being, which is wealth, if you don't have this conversation? I don't think you can. I think you can act like it, show up. And I think you could even think you are like, oh, I'm going to work and I'm doing my thing and I'm feeling good because at least this was my experience. But I wasn't always living in here. Thought I was good, but I was doing it here and I was on autopilot. And then I'm like, oh, there must be something under here. And so that's why, I think we got here. And then I would say it could be as simple as this, just recognizing that life is our guru. Life's going to give us what we need. So just getting up every day, recognizing what's triggering or activating in us and literally letting it go. Easier said than done. But Michael Singer, I've read everything that guy's put out at least twice. Met him, fascinating. I just think interesting. And so it's one philosophy, but I like it. He, because he synthesizes it. So literally, what he would answer with this is relax and release. And you'll start with the small stuff. You'll start with the driver in front of you doing 35 and a 45, and it's going to piss you off. And like, what are you doing, dude? Hit the freaking gas pedal. Get out of the left lane. Or you can be like, why is this activating me? And it's giving you a small thing where it's raining. I was talking to Beth earlier when we were on, right? And we were talking about weather, and I used a Michael Singer quote because he says, when asked his favorite weather, its answer is always today's. Why? There's something else small you can work with, right? It's like, why are you going to bitch about it's raining on my birthday? It has nothing to do with you and your birthday. How about, oh my God, I'm going to run in the rain and do some slides, right? And put on whatever you're going to do. Do naked slides. I don't care. The point is, you can't change it. So work with that. And then eventually, the bigger stuff is in there. It's going to start coming up because it's going to start feeling safe, and you're going to build skills just like you're learning anything else new. And you're going to be able to have the capacity of relax and let that go too. It can be that simple. And some may want to take it further and have some help, right? And that's where others come in to help navigate these waters.
Yeah. So if someone's doing some self exploration, is that sharing it with someone? Is that writing and writing it down? Is that like what's the medium that you have found for people to best sort of, hey, the best weather is today, because like just don't like let's start with the small, because it has nothing, all these other things that raining has nothing to do with you. Of course it's raining today, right? What's the best medium that you've found for people who are really looking to like, I want to create the safest space for?
All right. So what I would, so for me, in to your point, and by the way, I'm a curious guy. So like I once I cracked into this, which was about 2018 when I went down this rabbit hole, and I've gone far. Well, I think I've gone far. I've done a lot of stuff, say that. So I know of a lot of different modalities, but what's worked for me, I am a big fan of Michael Singer because of the simplicity and synthesis that he puts out there. So like his works, The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment, I would recommend in opposite order. I would read Surrender Experiment first and then The Untethered Soul. But it's in many ways simple. And I think literally, if it resonates with you, take that. And that would be my point. It would be going down the path that resonates with you. Something else that I have found very beneficial, not for everyone, but in a therapeutic setting, psychedelics, the use of um, plant medicine in a therapeutic container. Has been amazing for me and for getting out of the head and into the body, because done in people hear that, okay, and again, this would be a whole thing to unpack, but I'm just straight up telling you my experience. It can get you out of here and into here, whether you want to or not. That's not all good, right? Because you could too much too fast, not in a proper held therapeutic container. That's not awesome, right? But in a proper held container, a light enough dose, it can get you out of here just enough to get in here and be in a safe container with someone who's going to take you, let's say, to some of these scenes of the crime to be able to work through and unpack and integrate. Um, then, of course, all the other modalities of um, breath work or simple orienting. There's someone out there that I'm a fan of. It's called Smart Body Smart Mind. Her name is Irene Lyon, SBSM, and I really like her stuff. It's playing the long game, but it's titrating into these things in a embodied way. So she teaches you how to orient. She teaches you how to so orienting can be you think you're orienting because you're taking everything in, but you're doing it from a hyper vigilant, not safe place, right? And that happens a lot. Or you're orienting from a wow, like check out clouds and trees and that beautiful sunset, or from a exploration, right? Sounds so basic, but for some that's not, right? And so I think her strategies, these are things that have resonated with me and have been um, super helpful. And, 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 and then of course finding someone who you feel safe with, that's very good, that can get into some of these deeper waters if you wanted to go down that road. It's so funny, right, that we're doing this, because with my background in wealth management, we're basically having a therapy session here, a conversation, and I'm great with it because, as I said, no agenda. Where it goes, it goes. But to me, it feels like the next chapter. When I think of well-being and I think of who we really are, and I think we forget who we really are, um, this is what everyone's chasing. So I love that we're having this conversation, because any listener, whether it's a client that has wealth or it's just someone checking this thing out, is after the same thing we are, which is well-being, which is this state of I'm okay and I want to explore today to its fullest and live like full out, being fully authentically me, with all of my light and dark and all of the so-called good and bad, all of me present in this moment, and seeing what's up today and explore. Isn't that what we're here to do? So, yeah.
I Scott, I love that. Um I've lately been having the realization in conversations that what you just said was so beautifully said. And in my simple terms, I feel like we spend so much of our life trying to become adults, and then once we finally become an adult, we spend so much time trying to reclaim. I have a 4.5-year-old, and I watch her exist. I mean, she is all, like you said, all the good, all the things that maybe are maybe not necessarily so great, but she is like all in, full send right now. And you look at her and go, you want her to like hang on to that, because rather than trying to rush to become what we call adulthood, or what we perceive as like when this, then I'll be an adult, then I will have like arrived. And you realize that no, um I look at it and she is so present, and it's a beautiful thing.
That's such a good example, Ben. Um, yeah, thank you. That is such a good example. Have you seen, if you haven't, I'd love to share the Alan Watts video of, okay, I had it as part of the Way to Wealth. So the Way to Wealth is our process, and the way is just that. And that is the harmony of what is and living in the present moment. So that's the way. So again, the two's the team, and then wealth's the acronym of structure and the money and all the stuff. But then using the stuff to be in the way, like to be in the harmony with all things, what your daughter beautifully lives and illustrates for us crazy humans. This video from Alan Watts, I'll sum it quickly, but then I'll give you a link because you could share it. And it's this video that shows us being born and then going into school. And so we're in school and we're wanting to get to middle school. And once we're to middle school, we want to get to high school. And once we're high school, we want to get to college, because then we're going to get a degree. And when we get a degree, we can find our life partner, who then we could buy the house with this picket fence, so that we could then have kids. And when we have kids, then we could get this job that we're going to have a career. And then when we have the career, we're going to be able to retire. And they get to this certain age and going, what the hell? Who signed us up for this? And it's so true, right? Where she's like, screw that. This is what right here, right? And his whole point is, you missed the entire thing because you are never here. And that's it. And that's why you even dig, because some of this maybe like in trauma is a buzzword now, and I get all that. I think some of it is kind of bullshit, but it's not. But where I think it is when it can become a buzzword and it's all we talk about, which is why I try to counterbalance with there's also good, because it's true. And again, if we don't look at it, I don't, can we be fully right in? And I don't think we can, because we're bringing these impacts along with us. unconsciously. So yeah, thanks for that example. And I will give the link to this Alan Watts video. I think it's like 3 or 4 minutes, but it's so fitting right here and so worth the watch.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. You just hit on something. I think so often we as humans want to quantify good and bad. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is Nelson Mandela when asked, after 20 plus years in prison, he was asked, he's like, did you feel like you lost out? And I think if you go back and look at the interview and you hear him say it, he's almost indignant. He goes, he basically responds, he goes, I never lose. He goes, I'm either winning or learning. And that really resonated with me because I think that people go like be trauma avoidant. And and I don't think that's really living because I think that like Newton's third law, equal and opposite reactions. I think the deeper that you have either been forced to or that you have put yourself in a position to experience, like life is not a continuum of just pleasure and things that are just abundance. Is that when you put yourself in enough positions that I think that that equal and opposite reactions. And the thing that I've started saying is that I think that the traumas, the headwinds, the hard things are actually just the down payment on the thing. It's like you did layaway. Sorry, I date myself in terms. I'm like, I think I'm one of the last generations that remembers layaway before, in terms of that went away. Yeah, and but it's basically it's like a down payment on if you're willing to unpack it later. It's just a down payment on future winning.
I like that. And it makes me think of, um, again, the trauma word's used so much now, but it can be called and is called for some post traumatic growth versus post traumatic stress. And it doesn't mean that you didn't have impacts. We all do, but it is for your growth, actually, right? It's doing it for your growth. I had a quote on the good or bad that I wanted to share. I read this guy Jeff Foster, and um, anyway, in my book shelves full with stuff like this. His quote said, "Stop trying to heal yourself, fix yourself, even awaken yourself. Stop trying to fast forward the movie of your life. Let go of letting go. Healing is not a destination. Be here. Your pain, your sorrow, your doubts, your longings, your fearful thoughts, they are not mistakes, and they aren't asking to be healed. They're asking to be held here, now, lightly in the loving, healing arms of present awareness." And I read that one night and I'm like, that is so well said. Uh, I believe, because to me, it's all just energy. And this gets back to the English language I mentioned before. As soon as we start labeling it, we're giving meaning to something that may or may not be accurate and or true if it's literally energy, like there is an energy of a rattlesnake and an energy of a butterfly and an energy, but it's just energy. It's not good or bad per se, right? You see, and if we don't label it, then it's just that, right? Maybe it just wants seen and, as he says, held, and there's really not a lot for us to do with it. But don't label it and don't be good and bad, or don't suppress it or don't express it on someone. I think there's a lot of power in that poem and awareness.
Yeah. And one of my clients that I work with on the entrepreneur coaching side, he said that he waits at least a year before he labels whether it was. Uh, he said I have a hard time even labeling a bad experience, but he goes, I give it a year. He goes, it just was, and then I will. He goes, I believe he said he has like this journal of um, this journal of things that have happened, that then he'll go back through a year later to be able to go and actually do a real audit and be like, well, I think at the time I would have labeled this bad. Like this was a trauma. This was like a bad thing. And in actuality, it was actually something that was a growth, was actually a growth moment.
There's a lot of wisdom there. There was a story told of this man and his son uh, in Ireland or wherever, and all these um, his son was on a horse, and you know this story, and so he fell off and broke his leg, the son. And so all the neighbors came in and were like, "Oh my gosh, man, I am so sorry. What horrible news and bad, fortune for your son to have fallen off this horse and broke his leg." And he said, "Maybe." And the next day, all these horses like came on his property and like took up residence where he had all these horses. And so it was going to make him all kinds of money because he had access to these horses. And these neighbors like, "This is crazy. I can't believe what good fortune all these horses have come on your property and like what money you're going to have at this point." And he said, "Maybe." And the next day, the horses left and ran off and ran through some of his fencing and all of his stuff. And you get the neighbors came and they're like, "Oh my God, how could this happen to anyone? They broke down your fence and you're going to lose X, Y, and Z." And he said, "Maybe." And it goes on, but that's the point, right? Is like we give it this definition of good or bad and it means X, Y, Z. And his answer was always, "Maybe." That's it.
I love that. That's a really, really good story. Um, well, Scott, I have loved having you on. This has been an amazing, amazing conversation, and I just appreciate the your wisdom. If people want to find out more about you, they want to like follow you on either on socials. It's I know that you have 3 books, one of which was a New York Times bestseller. Where can they find it? If they want to engage you, how do they do that?
Yeah, I would say the easiest place, Ben, is our website, which is the way to wealth. So spelled out the way, the number 2, wealth.com. And you'll see information on podcasts from me there. My books would be available there. And that would be the easiest way for people to follow up and learn more about me if interested.
Yeah, fantastic. Anything on socials?
I do. I honestly don't know what they're probably on that site, but I don't know what they Erica helps me with all that. I don't even know how to log in, but thank you. I do have a book, so The Way to Wealth is coming out. It's a tome. I think it's probably going to be 500 and some pages, but it's basically, yeah, my life's work on the financial wealth front. Um, yeah, coming out soon, and maybe there'll be another one, which is more of my life journey and story, which is more what I shared today on a healing path and journey at some point. But yeah, next sometime in 2026, the Way to Wealth book will be out.
All right, fantastic. Well, once that comes back out, we'll have to have you back on. Uh, Scott, one of the things I like to do with my guests is to allow them to have the last word. I like to call it a ripple, a thought, call to action, a question. What would you have our audience leave with today?
We touched on it. I mean, what comes to me immediately then is um, the idea of well-being. And just so I would just ask the question based on the conversation that's everyone has listened to today. Where are you at? Where do you feel you're on the scale of well-being? Like, how are you really feeling? And tap into that. There's so much access that we have as far as learning and people that can help in various areas. But I would just say, yeah, rate yourself on where you're at on well-being, and then focusing on that being really what you're after.
I love it. Scott, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing so generously. Learned a bunch of things today and truly was an absolute delight. Other people Dan Martell has this quote. He says, looks like work, feels like play. Thanks for making this feel like play today.
Yeah, well, look, hopefully I represented West Virginia and brought it with our West by God.
You may have to do a new census, I think, after this podcast. Appreciate you, Scott. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.